got you there with Sean DeLaney. We got you there with Sean DeLaney.
I'm Sean DeLaney, and today on the What Got You There podcast, I sit down with one of my favorite thinkers of all time, Adam Robinson. Now, Adam is a former chess grandmaster. He was the founder of the Princeton Review. He is an advisor to large hedge funds and institutions because Adam understands how to find simplicity in the most complicated topics. And that's one of the things we discuss. We talk about excellent decision-making, some of the most important ideas Adam's uncovered, and how he lives the most important ideas he's uncovered. Also, what are the most important questions you can ask yourself in life? And what was the one question he asked Warren Buffett when he sat down with him? If you're ready for a deep and intellectually stimulating conversation, then get ready for my talk with Adam Robinson.
We got you there with Sean DeLaney.
That has me thinking, Adam, you've been remarkable at understanding the impact of questions and asking incredible questions. So this is going to be a little bit out there. I'm wondering though, say you were someone's current day Bobby Fischer and your 13-year-old self runs into yourself on the street corner of 34th and 6th. What is the crucial question that 13-year-old should be asking of you?
But see, I don't, okay, that's an interesting question, right? And I don't know that a 13-year-old or anyone would get that interested in what Adam has to say or do, because it's such an eclectic, path, right? That I've had. And
that's why I see so much beauty in it.
So maybe, so anyone who said, what's the common denominator? You've done so many different things. Like, what links it all? And that would be an interesting question for me. But that's a really good question. You think about, so the power of questions. So the first time I met Buffett was at a fundraiser. It was a sit-down dinner, 12 of us at a fundraising dinner. And I'm not going to mention any names or anything, but it was a fundraiser. So I'm not going to say what it was for, but it was, 10 of us with Buffett. And each of us paid a fair amount of money for the fundraiser to have this dinner. And each of us got to ask one question. The whole dinner, that was it. You could ask one question. And not surprisingly, everybody asked him investment questions. It's Warren Buffett. Let's ask him about investing. I think it's something he knows about. And so it's my turn. And the reason we only got to ask one question is that we'd paid a lot of money to have dinner with Buffett. And everybody at the dinner knew that everybody else would start to hog the conversation if you could start to talk, right? I mean, I wouldn't have, but everybody knew that somebody there would start to really engage too much, and we had paid to hear Buffett speak.
Yeah.
That was the rule, one question. So everybody asked about investing, this and that. And I asked him, my question was this: what keeps you up at night? This is a man who's thought about the world very deeply. He's been through a world war, a depression, many economic cycles, many cultural cycles. He's seen it all. And really one of the wisest men who ever lived, really, he and Munger. And so I said, what keeps you up at night? I remember saying, let me think about that. And because he's seen it all, not much keeps him up at night, right? And so, yeah, I think the question that you ask is anyone in that kind of situation, that you just asked me, it's a non-obvious one, and it's an authentic one. And when I met Fisher, who literally was my hero, I mean, I'd done nothing the last 3 years, but spend, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours every night playing over his games. And I wasn't trying to memorize them. They were so beautiful. But I knew them all by heart, as it turns out. And so when I went up to him in that moment, I was authentic. There's something else in that moment, actually. And this is a really important, to go back to your earlier question about the ideas you live by, right? Is that my attention was totally focused on him. If I had thought so there was no room to be self-conscious. And when I was with my mother 100 yards away, I didn't hesitate for a second. I didn't go, okay, wait, there's Bobby Fischer. Okay, I said I'd spend the day with you. Let me think about this. It was like, boom. And then when I was with it, when I immediately ran up to him, mind you, this is my hero. It didn't even occur to me to think about myself like, oh, what would he think if I ran up to him and asked him something? Like I literally wasn't aware of myself. I was only aware of him and the question I had. By the way, that was one question. I had hundreds of questions because I knew all of his games. So that was just the one that spilled out of my mouth first. And so that brings me to a really powerful notion, like inhalation exercise. This is another powerful notion, that your attention should either be in one or two places: at the task at hand or on the other person in front of you. You're either alone working on something, and if you're not, you're with someone, that person has your full attention. And that was another epiphany for me. Well, actually, so I've always been that way, but about the power of that. And so, like right now, my attention is on you. So I don't know, I have no idea what you are thinking about me. So there's no self-consciousness. And so sometimes people say, Adam, wow, you seem so confident in public situations. But confidence would mean I was aware of myself. I'm not confident, and I'm not confident either. I'm only aware of the person in front of me or the task at hand. And so when we become aware of a negative emotion, fear, doubt, anger, any kind of negative emotion, it's a reminder to refocus your attention on the person in front of you or the task at hand. It's really, and just do that. And other things will take care of itself. And if you combine that with that earlier notion about inviting others to play, now if someone's in front of me, they have 100% of my attention, and I'm just looking to have a good time. Play. And with no agenda other than the play itself. Right?
There's a line I love. I can't remember who it's attributed to, but this makes me think of it. And that's ecstasy is attention at its fullest. It's a line I've thought a lot about.
That's fascinating. So the derivation of ecstasy, in fact, you're exactly right. Funny you should mention that, because ecstasy is to be outside of yourself. That's literally what it means. You look up the derivation, it means to be outside of yourself. That's ecstasy. And again, my attention is on the other person or the task at hand. So each moment, in a sense, is ecstatic, which reminds me of another, this is a Greek word, enthusiasm. And the derivation, people are always surprised, the derivation of enthusiasm, like the etymology from the ancient Greek, means to be filled with God. The theus, enthusiasm, the theus is a derivation from theo, like theology. Theo is God. And the Greek word for that, the Latin is inspiration, which means to breathe in God. and so yeah, so you're exactly right on ecstasy. You're outside of yourself, and to be liberated from oneself. You know, Michael Jordan once said that he never once thought about missing a shot, right? And he couldn't because he was fully focused on making the shot. So, because if you're worried about missing the shot, your attention is totally misplaced, right? And now he missed lots of shots, but that never entered his head because he's fully focused on making the shot. If he didn't, get the ball back, and stop them from making the shot. So, yeah, and attention is super important.
I'm even blown away hearing about your 13-year-old self, that commitment, that dedication, that focus. Was that a skill you had prior, or was that love for what you were trying to do in chess? Did that bring that out of you?
So it's interesting. Remember, it was a pretty simple goal. I just wanted to beat the kid in front of me. That was it. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to make the chess team. Swimming, I was totally dedicated to in a very notice it didn't occur to me to go, oh, maybe I should find out someone who knows how to game. Maybe there's a chess coach or a chess tutor or something. No. And I didn't actually I didn't join the chess team until late my sophomore year, like a year and a half later. So I just wanted to beat the kid. And then, I really like this. I like Fischer's games, and I would just study them. And I thought, what the hell, I may as well play in tournaments. And so it didn't set out to be any grand goal, really. And so, but yeah, the 13-year-old self, so you asked me something earlier, Sean, and you said about, when you're earlier in your career, you're casting about, like, what am I building here with my life? And I had a recollection only a few years ago about something when I was 12. So you mentioned the age 13. So I'm now addressing, I know you have men and women in your audience, right? And listening. Mm-hmm. I know this is true for men because I am a man. I don't know if the same thing applies to women, but it's this, and I would assert it, that men know who they are, males know who they are, and will be in the world by the age of 12. 12 before you're 13. So what, for example, Buffett, when he was 12, his dad took him on a trip from Omaha to New York. He was 12. And this is 1942, right? Depression, World War II, raging and stuff. And his dad takes him from Omaha to New York. And on that trip, takes him among various places, takes him to the New York Stock Exchange. And after that trip, Buffett turns to his dad, and he revered his father. He said, Dad, I'm going to become the richest man in the world so that I can give it all away. That was a statement he made to his dad when he was 12. Okay, so get this. And I only realized this a few years ago. So it was a memory. So I remember when I was 12, it was a mid-spring day, say April or May. It was a Sunday, and I was walking with my dad. I'm all of 12 years old. And I used to have really deep philosophical conversations with my father, always, like hours. And anyway, I'm talking about how much I hate school. Like, I hate school. Why do I have to go to school? Because I always just wanted to be left alone so I could daydream or read whatever I wanted to read. I didn't want to have to do things. Anyway, so I'm with my dad. And I'm talking about how much I hate school. And he turns to me and he asks, so what are you going to do about it? Now, he meant that as a philosophical problem. Okay, you, Adam, he was saying to me, you're in a situation you don't like. And you have to go to school. You're not getting out of that, buddy. So what are you going to do about it? In other words, how are you going to frame this? How are you going to approach this? In other words, how are you going to deal with the fact that you're stuck going to school? That was embedded within the question. And I said, and I remember to this day, but I had forgotten the memory. I remember to this. So I said, kind of frustrating, I said, I don't know, maybe one day I'll start my own. Right? Now, I had no entrepreneurial inkling at the time. I'm all 12 years old. It'd be like someone saying, oh, I hate food. And someone, and my father saying, so what are you going to do about it? I don't know, maybe one day I'll start my own restaurant. But that's what I said. Like for a 12-year-old boy who hated school, and it wasn't like, oh yes, I could do school better. I hated it. I didn't like it, and I think anyone else would like it. It's not like, oh yeah, I want to torture kids too. Let them go to school. So I say that without any, I hadn't thought about it. Anyway, so mind you, I'm sharing a memory that I only had about 3 or 4 years ago. And well, you know, because you know me and my background, when I was 25, I got out of Oxford and the law degree, don't know what I'm doing. And a year later, I had co-founded a company called the Princeton Review. So I started a school 13 years after I said that still goes on today. Millions of kids have read things that I developed, you know, eons ago. And I remembered that memory only a few years ago, and I went, wow. I did start a school just like I told my dad. And it wasn't like a vow, like Buffett, his statement to his father, that was a commitment. I'm going to become the richest, but he was proclaiming that. I wasn't proclaiming it. Oh yes, I'm going to start a school. No. And I've asked my male friends, and they go, yeah, it doesn't have to be by the age of 12. Sorry, it doesn't have to be at the age of 12. But by the age of 12, and I say this, so if you are a male, and you're like, oh, what should I be doing in the world? That when you were a boy, you knew stuff about yourself. And I say the reason 12 is so important as a cutoff is by the time you hit 13 and you enter puberty, all of a sudden you begin to compare yourself to other people and dating and all that. I got to look good for them. And it muddies the core authentic proclamation. Like, is it just a boy? I want to do that. Not to prove myself, not to. And so yeah, I think it's worth everyone. And it may be true also for girls, women, that their path is, so it's worth revisiting your childhood memories, the things you loved to do. And so that's another invitation. I'm inviting people to go back to their memories. And okay, let's see. Yeah, that's right. I always liked riding horses. What was that about? Or whatever it is.
Yeah, that's beautiful and I feel like a very important exercise to do that. One of the things you hit on there that just kind of has me thinking right now is around 13, you hit puberty, you're comparing yourself. It's almost like that childlike, it's just unobstructed, authentic self-expression at that age. And that's how you uncover that through line, those golden threads.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So well said. That's where you discover the through line, because you just stated it. It was very odd, that through line for me, because I was an introvert. It wasn't like, I'm going to start a school so I can talk to others, and this is how much of an introvert I was. So in high school, yeah, I'm on the chess team and I'm on the swim team, but basically those are the only people I talked to. And there were some people that told me after I graduated that they had never seen me speak, not once in 4 years of high school, not once, just in my own little world, right? And so and again, I had that epiphany, and I was very much an introvert my whole life. And then something shifted about 6 years ago. Oh, people. Yeah, Adam's in a candy store with lots of people. Just have fun, play. And so, yeah, and I'm doing serious stuff in the world, and yet it's all a form of play. Yeah, so.
Well, with that, one of the things that you brought in tremendous clarity to for me in my life is deciding to not ask yourself the question, what do I want to do? But more importantly, who do I want to be?
Yeah. And yes. Yeah. Unless you love doing something, right? Like, oh, yes. Like Brady, football. I love football. I want to be a football player, right? And yeah, but it then becomes, who do you want to be in the world? Which goes back to that earlier conversation we had about what statement are you making to the world? And the statement I'm making with much of what I do is play is really important in everything you do. I mean, philosophically important, not just, you should have a good time. Really, that's the highest form of gratitude for the gift of life is play. And so, yeah, it's the highest form of reverence. And again, the most serious things should be approached playfully. And so anyway.
Yeah, you mentioned some of the things you're doing in this world are pretty serious, and they are. But what I have such a deep, profound respect for what you do is the clarity you can bring to those things where things don't make sense to the majority of people. Somehow you're able to find clarity there. I would love to just hear you talk through this.
So, well, I mentioned before about my weakness, because the weakness, the strength that comes out of a weakness is that I actually have a hard time understanding complexity, things that are really complicated. So I'm always taking complexity. Really, I have like a Cocoa Puff brain, and I reduce it down to something that I can understand. And because in that process of distilling it down, I get to really core truths that are denied to people who can deal with complexity. But that complexity is really unwieldy. And which is why you need, again, whether in performance sports or art or anything, boil it down to a few things, and then you can really use those things very well. And so yeah, it's all about distilling. And, like I distilled the creative process or the human creation, like, okay, let's boil it down. Okay. And much of it comes down to deconstructing it and looking at it in the simplest possible way. And so I remember as a boy, my father, again, we had these deep philosophical conversations when I was 8 years old. And I remember he was saying something. He said, if you can't explain it simply, you really don't understand it. And so language use, and most people explain things really in complex ways. I alluded to a very thick book by a very famous person on how to live your life. And hey, couldn't you boil that whole thick book? Give me just a few rules that I can use. And so it comes from a really ruthless insistence on making things simple enough so that I, Adam, can understand them. And I figure if I can understand them, okay, then other people can. And so yeah, that's like when I started the Prince Review with my friend John Kantzman. And I had no idea what I was doing when I started. I said, oh, maybe I'll tutor a couple kids a day, write novels on the side. And it grew into what became the Prince Review. And so really, actually, now that you say it, I'm just thinking about this for the first time ever, is that it's the same thing that I threw myself into the chess. You just throw yourself into it and you just keep digging. And from that, you get some really few core principles, and the ahas. And then you realize, wow, think about it like this. When Wayne Gretzky was playing hockey, he was playing a very different game from everybody else on the ice, right? Same with Michael Jordan or anybody in any of those, or Bruce Lee fighting. He's fighting. His fight is very different. He's actually than whoever his opponent is, and so yeah, you just get the idea. They're looking at things these greats very simply, and yeah, because it's the only way actually you can function at a very high level. And so one of my favorite questions, which I stole from Steve Cohen, the Mets owner, and I was talking with him about something, and he's his friend, and he said, "Well, how would you know if you were wrong?" No, sorry. He said, "What would you need to see to know that you were wrong?" Right? And that's a boom question. And because most people, when they're presenting ideas, whether it's to buy gold or invest in this or buy NFTs or whatever it is, they have a view and they're trying to convince you to do something. And always the question is, okay, well, thanks so much. Buy gold. What would you need to see to know that I should be shorting gold? They don't have an answer to that question. They haven't thought it through. And so that's a great internal check. Like, what would I need to see to know that I was wrong? And so, of course, you know about confirmation bias, right? And so human beings are designed to look for information that confirms what it is they already believe. I'm doing exactly the opposite, always in real time. So once I form a belief, I am now actively looking to disprove it. If I believe X, I say, I believe that gold will go up. I've done the analysis, gold will move higher. I don't look for information to confirm what I already know. What would be that'd be a waste. So all I'm doing is I'm looking at very specific things. What would I need to see to know I should be shorting gold? Like, oh, interest rates just spiked, gold's going down. But the dollar just jumped 2% this week, gold's going down. Like I have very specific things. And you can do that even in your personal life. Like, what would I need to see to know that this person, like I think this person is committed to what I'm doing or what we're doing? But what would I need to see to tell me that that wasn't the case? And again, it's anti-confirmation bias. So I think that's a really important, another tool to add to our Batman utility belt when we go camping with Musk in Canada.
I hope that this question is really fascinating to me. I hope you don't view this as too in the weeds, but you do such a good job at deconstructing these timeless principles. And I'm just wondering for you, like, are you capturing these? Are you writing them down so you revisit, or once you reach a deep truth, you just know it and it's just in your head?
Remember, it's not in my head. I'm living it, right? It's not something I have to remind myself. I actually really, so for example, this is a really good example. This is actually a very profound topic. So all of your questions are really good, being in the weeds with you. So let's say I'm talking to somebody and I'm telling them this, for example, like when I saw Bobby Fischer, right? And changed my life in a pretty significant way. And like, how often does somebody bump into their hero, right? And that person was a famous recluse. I'm like literally one of 10 people in his whole life that he ever like let in, because he massively distrusted everyone, unfortunately. And anyway, so Oh, shoot. Now I lost train of thought. What was that? What was I talking about just a second ago?
So I was asking in terms of when you're deconstructing these ideas and then you live them as opposed to just having them.
Yes. Okay, now I remember. Now I remember the train of thought. Sorry. Again, Adam Cocoa Puff, I lost train of thought. So go back to, so if someone listening to that story might go, if they were right in the room when I was saying it, they might say, well, Adam, there are no coincidences, right? How often have you heard someone say that? Yep. There are no coincidences. Okay, so the person asserting that, do they live their life by that statement? Like, if you actually believed that there are no coincidences, and I'm confessing to you now that I don't. So for example, if you said, Adam, what are the odds that you would bump into your hero on a crowded New York City? And I wasn't even living in New York City. Yeah. I was living in Evanston. And he would just happen to show up when you're on a corner that you almost never are on with your mother, crowded. And I would say the odds, looking back on it, were 100%. Which is another interesting topic. Maybe we'll get to it. But so they say there are no coincidences, but they don't actually live their day-to-day life by that, right? And so any idea that I get, I ask myself, can I actually use this in real time? So for example, I've told you that, and you know this from other times that I've spoken about this, about creating fun and delight, like inviting others, be playful and invite them to play with no agenda. And so how do I live that life? So there are times when somebody says something and I want to go, get like, oh, that's not true. And I will find myself in that moment in real time going, is what I'm about to say going to increase the fun and delight in the situation, or is it going to do the opposite? There are a lot of times they catch us and go, oh, I can't say that, even though I'm really tempted. And so, yeah, there are a lot of times I go, I want to say or do something, and yet I know it violates that principle. By the way, I'm not perfect at times when I do just go, yeah. And I don't. But as often as I can, as a human being, other things equal, I ask myself, so there, I optimize around maximizing the play in any given situation. That's what I'm optimizing for. And so someone else might be optimizing to get noticed or this or that. And I'm not judging those, whatever, but I'm very clear about optimizing around something. So if an idea doesn't help you live your life or help others that you can share live their lives, like you started this off and said, well, we're going to up level here in this conversation. And we've actually discussed lots of things. So I don't write them down. I live them, but I don't think there's much to be said, really. I think that all that can be said about life, in other words, that would constitute, this is all the wisdom that is known, can be reduced down to a very few simple, like not much to be said. And then everything else is sort of a corollary of those few principles. And so, yeah, I think it's about just living and doing so mindfully. And do you really, this is so cliche, but walk the walk or walk the talk, or you know what I mean? Like, do you actually embody that principle mindfully in real time, minute to minute? And it's so really vitally important. Like, in anything you've read of Munger and Buffett, that they are absolutely living that day to day, minute to minute. That's how they live their lives. There's no doubt. And And so, yeah, so I think that's really important to live mindfully around optimizing whatever you're trying to optimize in the world. You know, this gift we've been given, and really as a planet. You know, I mentioned that I'm doing some serious stuff in the world, and so one of the things that I'm doing is I pose myself the following question. And it's a pretty serious one. So what if humanity, our species, was at a critical existential crisis right now? That if we don't get this moment right, next few years, we are likely going to spiral down into a very bad situation, like possibly the end of our species. So Pascal, a French philosopher, mathematician, he said, there's something known, of course, as you know, Pascal'S Wager. Like he chose to believe in God because it's a 4x4 matrix. I believe in God or I don't, and God exists or doesn't. So again, you go through the matrix. If I believe in God and he exists, yes, good for me. I'm lucky forever. If I believe in God but he doesn't exist, no foul, no harm. If I don't believe in God and he doesn't exist, no foul, no harm. But if I don't believe in God and he does exist, I'm in trouble. So you just go through the little 4x4 grid, right? Mathematician, philosopher, he said, so therefore I choose to believe in God. So here's Adam's wager. So here's my conjecture. We are either at the end of times for our species, humanity, or we're not. And do you believe that or not? And if we are and we don't do anything, we're screwed. In other words, if we are, in fact, if this is like the end of the road, and I know people, of course, they go, oh, you're just being alarmist. In past, we've dealt with very serious things, World War II, depression, lots of serious crises. In the moment, it seems it's never been worse. And I'm asserting, after a lifetime of thinking about things, I can think of no other time in history ever that was this serious. And we don't have time to go into it, but so I'm either right in that assertion or I'm not. Punchline coming in about 60 seconds. So if Adam is right and we don't do anything, we don't change what we're doing. Remember, you're not getting the results you want. Got to change what you're doing. So if we don't change what we're doing, we're screwed. If Adam is correct. Right? If Adam is incorrect, that it's not the end of times, and we don't change what we're doing, okay, it's still not a great world. Like clearly there are big problems. And if Adam is incorrect, it's not the end of times, but if we don't change, and if we do change, well, that's also good, like, because things could be improved. So either way, it argues that we as a planet need to change big time, big time. Everyone listening to me right now has a sense that the world is flying apart. There's a great poem by Yeats, written in 1917 at the end of World War II, called The Second Coming. And he said, the world is flying apart in anarchy. And he said, the best lack all conviction, and the worst of us are full of passionate intensity. And that's like such a description. Really, if you're listening to me right now, you should look that poem up, The Second Coming. It's very short, very, very short. And that's 1917, so 105 years ago. in the aftermath of World War I, which was horrific. So I said all that so to now make the following statement or ask the following question. If you thought it was the end of times, and in other words, for our species, like as humanity, we have really messed things up. And we have the technology now to do a lot of damage really quickly. What steps would you take? And you have to get it right. And I've been pondering that question for 5 years. And I've come up with an answer. Like, well, what would you do if you knew you had to get everyone to change what they were doing, and there was only one, you had one shot at it? Do you remember the movie Armageddon?
Yeah,
I don't
Bruce
know.
Willis.
Yeah, exactly right. So in Armageddon, those of you who you haven't seen, if you're listening, you haven't seen the movie. So it came out like, I don't know, 2000, this comet is headed towards Earth. And if Bruce Willis and his ragtag team of wildcatters, if they don't stop that comet, it's game over. So they have to stop the comet. And so I look at the world with that kind of urgency, and have for the last 5 years, and have addressed it. And I think I figured out an answer. It takes a little while, and I'm about to publish a white paper on it called the Renaissance Project. And so, which is really, in your questions, your in the weed questions have been so good, because really it all circles back to who do I want to be in the world, and share. And there's play, and there's a world that's really falling apart. There's a lot of pain in the world, clearly, and it's getting worse every day. And really, when I think back about history, I look back as the difference between now and then is the technology. We can do a lot of harm really fast, really fast. Genetic engineering just takes one virus to get out. We're all wiped out. Or a new life form. Oh, man. AI is a very serious threat. There are all these technological threats, not to mention the social and political and economic unrest in the world. I've been thinking very deeply. And again, here's the proviso to the question. What would you do? And you knew you had to succeed, not make a best effort. Like, you had to stop the comet. So there, that's a question I've been working on very as deeply as the other questions you've heard me think about. And again, have to succeed, not just good college try. So even though that sounds like a really serious topic, and it is, I'm playful when I approach it, and I'm gathering resources to make it happen. So there, yeah.
Adam, thank you for this, for the wisdom, the insights, the details along the way. This has just been, like we mentioned, 5 years in the making. This was a true pleasure for me. I would love to know one final question, though. If you could do this long form conversation with anyone dead or alive, just not a family member or friend, who would you want to spend the evening with, just asking questions of?
Wow. A bunch of names come to me. Oh, that's so tough. Okay, here's a thought experiment. I get to meet Jesus Christ and have dinner with him. And today, in other words, I get to talk to him today. And I say, did you, knowing that much of your wisdom has been misinterpreted, would you say anything different? Seeing the world that you see today, if you could go back and say things differently, would you say things differently? And so that would be a very interesting conversation, and because here's a man clearly, and he's not the only man in history or woman in history, was dedicated to up-leveling as many people as he or she could. And yet, if they were to look at the world and all the wisdom that they imparted, man, has it made a difference, right? And of course it has. Every piece of advice is an invitation to accept it or reject it. It comes back to invitation, right? And you can only invite people. Here, that's the door out of your jail cell, human being. That's the door. You can open it. You can go right out, or you can choose to stay inside your jail cell that you call life. You can only point the way. And so there, I'd want to know that, because it comes back to me, like trying to help as many people. So given what you now see, what advice would you give yourself, and what advice would you now give me, Adam? So I could think of other people.
Adam Robinson, that is a beautiful place to close out what I hope to be one of multiple conversations on what got you there. So thanks again.
I insist. Let's go back in the weeds, and we're gonna tweet and invite Elon Musk to go camping with us, and what the hell, and ask lots of questions.
Got you there with DeLaney.
And I want to thank you for watching another powerful episode of the What Got You There podcast. We drop new episodes every single Sunday, so if you subscribe to the page, you'll be the first one to see these powerful episodes. Remember, we deconstruct world-class performers to understand their strategy, tactics, and the routines they've used to help them become world-class in what they do. So if you want to understand and then implement these into your own life, you're going to want to subscribe to the page. Remember, we also put out a weekly newsletter called Momentum Monday, which is just a quick synthesis of everything I've been reading, listening to, and watching behind the scenes. You can stay up to date and follow everything we're doing at whatgotyouthere.com.
Got you there with DeLaney. Got you there.